I've worked the line at that range for almost 9 years now. High desert, wind that never really stops, dust that gets into everything, your coffee, your ears, the corners of your eyes. We run advanced courses out there for people who already think they're good. Cops who want to be better, contractors, some military guys between deployments. Once in a while, a regular person with money and nerves who wants to feel like they could survive a bad day. I've seen a lot of tough people come through that front gate. But I never once saw a whole room go quiet the way it went quiet the morning the commander looked at her arm. I still think about it. I've told the story maybe 40 times and it still does something to my chest. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. It was a Monday in early spring. Cold morning, the kind where your breath shows but you know by noon you'll be sweating through your shirt. We had a 5-day advanced marksmanship and close quarters course on the books. 18 students signed up. We'd cleared the lot, set up the classroom trailer, put the coffee on, the usual. Students started rolling in around 6:30. You can read people pretty fast in this job. There's a type that shows up to these things wanting to be seen. They park their loud trucks crooked across 2 spots. They wear the watches, the boots, the little patches that say things. They talk before they listen. We had a few of those that week. 3 guys in particular, early 30s, came in together. Gym arms, fresh fades, expensive sunglasses pushed up on their heads even though the sun wasn't really up yet. One of them, I remember, had a flag bandana around his neck. Loud laughs. The kind of guys who fill a room before they've earned any space in it. They weren't bad people, I want to be fair. They were just young in the way some people stay young forever, where confidence does all the talking and nothing's ever come along yet to teach them quiet. She came in last. She parked an old sedan at the far end of the lot, away from everybody. I noticed because she didn't take a good spot when there were plenty. Some people do that, they want distance. She walked up slow, hands in the pocket of a gray hoodie, the hood up against the cold. Average height, maybe 50s, hard to tell with the hood. She moved careful, the way people move when something in their body has been broken before and remembers it. A small limp, barely there. She had a beat-up rifle case and a range bag that had clearly been around the world and back. No patches, no flag, nothing to look at. She signed in at the trailer and I gave her the clipboard and she wrote her name in this small, careful handwriting. I didn't even read it close, just another student. I told her where to drop her gear and she nodded and said thank you in a low voice and went and sat by herself in the back corner of the classroom. The 3 loud guys had already claimed the front. Our lead instructor that week was a man I'll just call Ray's because he'd kill me if I used his real name in a story. Ray's ran the classroom intro. Safety brief, range rules, the whole thing, standard. And the woman in the hood just sat there in the back, quiet, taking notes by hand in a little notebook while the loud guys interrupted Ray's twice to tell stories about themselves. We broke for the first relay around 9, out on the line, cold metal, the smell of solvent and dust, and that's where it started. See, you can hide a lot under a hoodie, but on the firing line you've got to be able to move, roll your sleeves, get your gear on. And when she pushed her sleeves up to set her shooting position, the left one rode up past her forearm. That's when one of the loud guys saw the tattoo. It wasn't flashy. That's the thing people always expect when I tell this. They expect something dramatic. It wasn't. It was old ink, faded to that blue-gray color tattoos get after 20 years in the sun. On the inside of her forearm. Small design, I'd describe it as a compass, except the needle was a little crooked, hand-drawn looking, and wrapped around it was a strip that looked like medical tape, and underneath it a date and 4 short lines like 4 tally marks. That was all. No name. No fancy lettering. It looked like something done in a hurry, somewhere far from a real tattoo shop. The loud guy, the bandana one, leaned over to his buddies and said something I didn't catch and they all laughed. Then he said it louder on purpose so she'd hear. Hey, no offense, ma'am, but is that a real tattoo or did your grandkid draw on you? His buddies cracked up. She didn't look over, just kept loading her magazine, slow and even, 1 round at a time. That made him bolder. Guys like that, silence is a dare to them. For real though, he said, what is that, like a midlife crisis thing? My ex got one like that, said it meant something. He did the air quotes, big grin, what's it mean? And she said without looking up in that same low voice, it means something. That was it, that was all she gave him. And honestly it landed harder than anything she could have yelled because it shut him up for a second. But then his buddy chimed in and they started up again, riffing on the old lady at the range, the one with the busted car and the grandpa rifle and the crayon tattoo. Quiet enough that Ray's didn't catch it, loud enough that she did. I almost said something, I want you to know that. I almost walked over there. But I was a junior guy that week and the line was hot and Ray's was running it and I didn't. I've carried that little bit of nothing for years. Then the relay started. And here's where I should have known. Here's where any one of us should have known if we'd been paying attention to the right things. The loud guys shot first. They were fine, better than fine. Honestly, they'd clearly spent money on lessons. Fast, flashy, lots of noise, a little wild. They high-fived between strings like it was a video game. Then it was her relay. She got down behind that old rifle, and the whole way she did it was different. There was no wasted movement. None. She didn't adjust and readjust the way most people do. She got into position once, settled like water finding its level, and went still, completely still. The kind of still you can't fake and can't teach. The kind that takes years and a lot of bad days to build. And then she shot. I've watched 10,000 people shoot. I know the sound of good shooting before I ever see the target. It's a rhythm, not fast, not slow, inevitable, each shot landing in the exact same beat as the last, like a clock. That's what came off her line. Tick, 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 no drama, no adjustment, just rounds going exactly where she sent them. When we walked the targets, hers had one ragged hole in the center. One, all her rounds through the same spot. The loud guy's targets looked like buckshot patterns next to it. Bandana guy stopped laughing. He stood in front of her target for a long second, then looked back at her, and I watched something flicker across his face. Not respect yet. Confusion, the first crack in the story he'd been telling himself. She just collected her brass, quiet, and walked back to the line. I went and found Ray's at the trailer at lunch. I told him, hey, the lady in the back, she's not what she looks like, watch her shoot. And Ray's, who's seen everything, just kind of half-smiled and said sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. He didn't know yet either. None of us did. What none of us knew was who was coming on day 3. Because halfway through every advanced course, we bring in a guest evaluator. Someone with real-world experience to run the final scenario and talk to the students. It's a big draw. We don't always announce who it is ahead of time, and that week we'd landed somebody good. A retired commander, SEAL teams, 20-some years. A name that in our little world made people sit up straight. He was due to arrive Wednesday morning. She had no idea. He had no idea. And neither did I, standing out there in the cold on that first Monday, watching a quiet woman in a gray hoodie pick up her brass while 3 loud men slowly ran out of things to say. Tuesday she barely spoke. She showed up early, did the work, stayed late to clean her rifle when everyone else had gone to find dinner. I started noticing little things about her. The way she always sat where she could see the door. The way she never let anyone get behind her without turning a little. The way she'd flinch just barely, just a hair, when the loud guys slammed a tailgate or dropped a steel plate. Not scared, the opposite almost, ready, wound tight under all that quiet. The loud guys had backed off some after the target thing, but not all the way. By Tuesday afternoon they'd settled into a new story about her, the lucky old lady. One good group, they decided, was luck. They needed it to be luck because the other thing it could be was too uncomfortable to look at. I brought her a coffee that afternoon. I don't know why. She'd been cleaning her rifle alone at the bench, and I just poured a second cup and set it down next to her without saying much. She looked up at me, surprised, and for the first time the hood was down and I got a real look at her face. She had scars, a long thin one along her jaw, another at her hairline. And her eyes, I don't know how to describe her eyes except to say they were the eyes of someone who'd seen the worst day of a lot of other people's lives and carried all of them home. Thanks, she said. You shoot like you've done it for a living, I said carefully. She wrapped both hands around the coffee. Long time ago, she said, and that was all. She didn't offer it and I didn't push. But she gave me a small smile, the first one I'd seen from her, and went back to her rifle. I asked her before I left, almost as a joke, what branch. She was quiet for a second, then she said, I was a medic, just that, a medic, and something in the way she said it told me not to ask the next question, so I didn't. Wednesday morning the commander arrived. You could feel the energy change before his truck even parked. The staff straightened up. Ray's put on a clean shirt. Word had gotten around to the students by then, and the loud guys were practically vibrating. They'd looked him up. They knew the resume. To them he was a poster, a legend, a chance to be seen by somebody who mattered. He came in quiet. Actually, that surprised people. The truly hard ones usually are quiet. He was maybe 60, gray, built solid still, moved with that same economy I'd noticed in her, nothing wasted. He shook hands with the staff, nodded at the students, didn't make a speech, just asked Ray's to run the morning normal so he could watch before he said anything. So we ran the line. He stood back, arms crossed, watching. The loud guys shot first and you could tell they were performing for him, extra fast, extra loud, a little reckless. He didn't react, made a couple of small notes on a card, his face gave nothing. Then her relay. She got down behind the rifle the same way she always did, that water finding its level thing, and I watched the commander because I'd started to suspect what I was looking at and I wanted to see if he saw it too. He saw it. The second she settled into that position, his arms came uncrossed. He took a step forward, his head tilted just slightly the way a man does when something old and buried starts knocking on a door inside him. He watched every shot, tick, 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 that clockwork rhythm, and his face, which had given nothing all morning, started to give something now. I couldn't read it yet, but it was something. When the relay ended, he walked the targets himself, stopped at hers, stood there a long time over that one ragged hole, longer than made sense. The loud guys took it as their moment. Bandana guy sidled up next to the commander at her target and said something like, "Crazy how some people get lucky, huh, sir?" Trying to bond, trying to put himself on the right side of the joke. The commander didn't answer him, didn't even seem to hear him. He turned and looked back down the line at her, at the woman in the gray hoodie collecting her brass, and I saw his eyes go to her arm, to the sleeve that covered it. We broke for the scenario brief. This is the part where it all came apart in the best way. The final exercise involved gear, full kit. Everybody had to suit up, plate carriers, the works for a low-light shoot house run, and to do that you roll your sleeves, you strip down to a t-shirt under the carrier. There's no hiding under a hoodie in full kit. We were in the staging bay, concrete floor, fluorescent lights, gear hanging on every wall. 18 students gearing up, that nervous energy, the loud guys narrating their own greatness as usual, and she pulled the hoodie off over her head. T-shirt underneath, both arms bare. And there it was in the hard white light for the whole room to see. The compass with the crooked needle, the strip of tape, the date, the 4 tally marks, old blue-gray ink on a forearm laced with scars I hadn't seen the full extent of until that moment, old ones, the kind that don't come from any accident, the kind that come from someone digging metal out of you in a place with no real doctor. Bandana guy saw it and couldn't help himself. "Even now," he said loud to the room, "there it is, the famous tattoo. You ever gonna tell us what it means, or is it a secret?" And the commander, who had just walked into the bay, stopped. I mean stopped mid-step, like he'd hit a wall of glass. I was maybe 10 feet from him. I watched the color go out of his face. I watched a man who had, by all accounts, faced death more times than anyone in that room could imagine. I watched him go pale and still and stare at her arm like the floor had just dropped away beneath him. "Where?" he said. His voice came out wrong, cracked. He cleared it and tried again. "Where did you get that?" The room went quiet, even the loud guys felt it, everyone turned. She looked up at him, and I watched her face change too, slow, recognition coming up through it like a sunrise. The hood was down. Their eyes met properly for the first time, and whatever he saw in her face and whatever she saw in his, it was the same thing. 2 people looking across 20 years at the worst and most important day of both their lives. "Same place you got yours, sir," she said quietly, "I imagine." And he reached up, this big, hard, legendary man, and he pulled back his own sleeve. Same tattoo, the crooked compass, the tape, the date, the 4 marks, older, faded the same way hers was on a forearm that had its own scars. Nobody in that room breathed. He crossed the bay to her like the rest of us weren't even there. "It's you," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice had gone soft, the way the biggest voices do when they finally break. "You're Doc, you're the medic from the ridge." She nodded just once. Her jaw was tight, holding something down. And then this man, this commander, this name that the loud kids had looked up online and worshipped. He put his hand over his mouth and his eyes filled and spilled right there in front of 18 students, and he said, "I have been looking for you for 19 years. The story came out in pieces over the next hour, some from him, some from her, some I pieced together later. I'll tell it to you straight. 19 years before, on a ridge in a country I won't name, his element walked into an ambush. Pinned down, 3 men killed in the first minute. The lieutenant, that's what he was then, a young lieutenant, took 2 rounds and went down behind cover with his men dying around him and no way out. And a medic came across that ground. Not their medic, theirs had been one of the first hit. She was attached from another unit, came over the open with rounds chewing the dirt all around her, and she got to them. She worked on the lieutenant first, packed the wounds, kept him from bleeding out, then moved to the next man and the next. She held 4 of them together with her hands in gauze and pure refusal for the better part of an hour until the birds could get in. 4 men who would have died on that ridge went home because she wouldn't stop. And the whole time, he told us, all he could see was her hands. Her face was covered in blood and dust in the chaos of it. He never got her name. In the noise, nobody did. She got loaded on a separate bird, badly hurt herself, that's where her scars and her limp came from, and shipped to a different hospital, then a different base, then out. The way the system worked back then, they lost each other completely. He didn't even know if she'd survived. The 4 of them who made it, they got the tattoo together after. The crooked compass for the ridge, the tape for the medic who held them together, the date, and 4 marks for the 4 she saved. They got it so they'd never have to explain it and never have to forget it. They got it to carry her since they couldn't find her. What none of them knew was that she'd done the exact same thing, same design. She'd gotten it for the 4 she saved and the 3 she couldn't. She carried them too, all these years, quietly, in a gray hoodie, in an old sedan, doing a job and going home and saying nothing because the worst day of her life was also the proudest, and that's a thing you don't really have words for. I told this story to my kids, the commander said, standing there in that bay with his sleeve pushed up. I told it to my grandkids, the medic who crossed the ridge. I never had a name to give them, I never had a face. He looked at her like he was afraid she'd disappear. I just had this, he touched the tattoo, and I never thought I'd see it on another arm in my life. I looked over at the loud guys then, bandana guy. He'd gone white. He was staring at the floor, all that noise gone out of him completely. Because he'd spent 2 days mocking that tattoo, calling it a crayon drawing, a midlife crisis, a grandkid's scribble, and now he was standing in a room learning that the same exact mark was inked into the arm of the man he'd driven 2 states to impress, that it was a sacred thing. That the quiet woman he'd laughed at had run across open ground through enemy fire to drag men like the commander out of the dirt, while he was, in middle school. He walked over to her, to his credit. It took him a minute to find his voice. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't." He stopped, started over. "I didn't know what I was looking at." And this is the part that gets me every time, she didn't make him squirm. She didn't get even, didn't have to. She just looked at him, kind almost, and said, "Most people don't, son, that's kind of the point of it." And she put her hand on his shoulder for a second, the way you'd steady somebody, and let him off the hook he'd built for himself. We didn't run the rest of the scenario that day. The commander asked Ray's if he could just talk to the students instead, and Ray said of course, and the commander sat down on an ammo crate in that gear bay and told us all what he'd never got to tell the one person who needed to hear it. He told her in front of everyone what those 4 lives had become. The kids, the marriages, the grandkids, the whole quiet, ordinary mountain of life that existed in the world only because a stranger refused to leave him on a ridge. He named the men. He told her each one's story, and she sat there and took it, this woman who'd carried the date in her skin for 19 years thinking maybe it had all been for nothing, finally getting to hear that it hadn't been, not even a little. By the end, half the room was wrecked. I'm not ashamed to say I was one of them. They sat together at lunch, the 2 of them off at the far end of the bench, talking low, catching up across 20 years. The loud guys ate in silence at the other table, changed somehow. The whole class was changed, you could feel it. We'd all walked in thinking we knew what tough was, what a hero looked like, what a guest of honor was supposed to be, and we'd all been schooled by a quiet woman in a gray hoodie who'd parked at the far end of the lot so she wouldn't take a good spot from anybody. She finished the course? Of course she did. Outshot everybody by a mile, but nobody was keeping score by then. On the last day, the commander gave out the certificates, and when he got to her, he didn't hand her hers. He stood there holding it, and then he came to attention, this retired commander, this legend, and he saluted her. A medic held it, and she stood up slow with that limp, and she returned it. 18 students watched a SEAL commander salute the woman they'd mocked on Monday, and not one of them will ever forget it. I know I won't. She drove off in that old sedan at the end of the week, same as she came, quiet, hood up against the cold. The commander watched her tail lights all the way out to the highway. I asked him later when she was gone what he was thinking standing there. And he said something I've never been able to shake. He said, "All those years I thought I'd carried her, the tattoo, the story, all of it, I thought I was the one keeping her alive." He shook his head slow. "Turns out she was the one carrying me the whole time, and she never once asked to be found. I think about her more than I should, the lesson of her anyway. We spend so much time being loud, wanting to be seen, wanting the watch and the patch and the right table at the front of the room. And the realest people, the ones who actually crossed the open ground when it counted, they're almost always the ones in the back. In the gray hoodie, parked at the far end of the lot, quiet, carrying more than you'll ever know, asking you for nothing. So the next time some quiet person in a worn-out jacket walks into a room and somebody laughs at the faded old tattoo on their arm, maybe don't laugh. You have no idea what that ink cost. You have no idea who they carried across the ridge. And you have no idea who they're still carrying every single quiet day without ever once asking to be found.